All right, so I'm gonna pray us into the Bible study. Dear Heavenly Father in heaven, we just want to thank you for letting us come in to your presence once again and learn from this Bible study. Just be with us and let anyone watching this learn from this Bible study we're doing. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so here we go. We're gonna do Genesis 3:7.
Chapter 37, Joseph's dreams. So Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundles stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. His brothers responded, so you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. This time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers. But his father scolded him. What kind of dream is that? He asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready, and I will send you to them. I'm ready to go, Joseph replied. Go and see how your brothers in the flocks are getting along, Jacob said. Then come back and bring me a report. So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. What are you looking for? He asked. I'm looking for my brothers, Joseph replied. Do you know where they are pasturing their sheep? Yes, the man told him. They have moved on from here, but I heard them say, let's go on to Dothan. So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there.
All right.
Let's see.
So I think one of the things we spoke about in the beginning was the fact that Joseph was being molded as a worker with integrity that would benefit him later in life. So it says in verse 2 that he worked for his half brothers, the sons of his father's wife, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brother were doing. And we spoke about that before, about the fact that he's building this integrity, he's building this habit of being a good worker, that would help out eventually the king of the king of Egypt, but it's going to help his father right now. It's good. Verses 3. We spoke about the favoritism, how favoritism played a role in Joseph's being sold, and that's the fault of Jacob. And we need to be careful not to do that as parents. It says Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him at an old age, and he was also married to his. He was also born to his favorite wife, which was Rachel. Exactly, and then so he gives him a special gift, and he didn't give it to any of the other kids, so that caused resentment as well. And it says that in verses 4, his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. So, like you said, favoritism is dangerous. It can cause there to be jealousy amongst the children. And so, like you said, that's something to be careful for. Verses 5 says, one night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated it more than ever. And I think what we could take there is I think you got to be careful who you share information with, because if someone doesn't like you, you tell them, hey, I passed this test and man, I passed it with flying colors. You tell them, yo, I'm going to graduate. You tell them that, man, I finally found a girl. Man, like they're not trying to hear your good news. If anything, you telling them good news is going to make them want to plot more against you. So I think being careful who you share your good news with is something that's important.
And then he has a dream that he's going to be, I guess, more esteemed than the rest of his family. And verse 8, the brothers say, so you think you'll be our king, do you? You think you'll actually reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and the way he talked about them. So this dream showed that he would be in high regard, probably king over them. And like you said, they're not trying to hear that because they already hated him. So.
Right.
And then verse 9 is the same thing. He has another dream that he would be over or king or ruling over, resembles his family. And even his father scolded him because of that dream. And he's like, what, you think we're going to bow to you? It's kind of like that a David situation. It's like, who is this guy for us to be bound to him?
That's good. And but it says in verses 11, but while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. And I think that's something to take as, don't be so quick to disregard a dream someone has because you don't like what it seems like, or you don't like what the person had to say. Like the role you played in the dream could have been less significant. So now it's like, screw this dream. But I think his dad had more wisdom. And while his brothers are jealous of him, his dad wasn't. He's actually trying to figure out what does dream mean. And I think we have to always remember dreams have meaning. Whenever God gives you a dream, at least there's a meaning behind it. And there's something that God is trying to get you to portray. And I think like Joseph's dad in this moment, he's wondering what the dream means. So I think rather than us, pushing people's dreams to the side or even our own dreams, we should take them to God and ask God for understanding. And Daniel did that, and God actually gave him understanding by sending the angel Gabriel to him to explain the dream. So I think rather than being jealous of someone's dream, or rather than you throwing a dream, you have to decide, take it to God and ask him for understanding.
So then verse 12 says, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flock at Shechem. So essentially they're working for their dad. And then Jacob says to Joseph, your brothers are pasturing sheep at Shechem. Get ready and I will send you to them. So once again, we spoke about Joseph being a good worker for his father, preparing him for later. And he does a faithful job in his season of work. And then when he goes, typically he's going to give them a bad report. Verse 14 says, go and see how your brother and the flock are getting along. Jacob said, then come back and bring me a report. So his job was to come and be honest. I think we spoke about that too, is like when you have your siblings, you don't want to be a snitch. But if you have integrity, you got to do the right thing because you're working for your father, not for your brothers.
Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. And just another point I think that's important is, as a worker, you have to make sure you do what you're asked. Like I think what stands out, it says, so Jacob sent him on his way. So Joseph was sent to work. And one thing about God is when he's preparing you and me, I think that's something that we are trained to learn early on, is you have to wait till you're given instructions or wait to be given orders.
Like when I go to work, I don't just say I feel like driving a truck to taking a load to New York today. No, they tell me we're sending you to Connecticut. And so I'm sent to where I'm supposed to go. And I think one thing I'm seeing about work, it really does prepare you for your ministry calling, because why ultimately God tells Moses you're not going to lead them anymore is he didn't listen. God says, speak to the rock. He struck the rock. So I think one thing that you see is that sent him. One thing that's important is when you're being prepared before a ministry calling, God wants you to learn, listen for instructions. Don't just do what you feel like doing, but listen. He could have said, I don't feel like doing that, but he was sent there and that's where he was going. And I think what you learn in that is when you're a worker of God, God gives the orders and he's going to send you where he wants you to go and you're just going to obey. So in essence, he's learning how to obey. That's something he was learning as well in this season, is how to obey. Because the work for God, that's one of the main things you're going to have developed is you know how to obey. Because if you don't learn that one, then it's gonna your career in ministry is gonna be very short.
Yep. I think the rest of it is he finds this man who gives him direction to his brother, and then he meets up with them later.
All right. So we could continue then if there's nothing else. No.
Joseph sold into slavery. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. Here comes the dreamer, they said. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. But when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. Let's not kill him, he said. Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him into this empty cistern here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him. Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Then, just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain by killing our brother? His blood would just give us a guilty conscience. Instead of winning, let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. And his brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites, who were Midianite traders, came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver. And the traders took him to Egypt. Sometime later, Reuben returned to get Joseph out of the cistern. When he discovered that Joseph was missing, he tore his clothes in grief. Then he went back to his brothers and lamented, the boy is gone. What will I do now? Then the brothers killed a young goat and dipped Joseph's robe in its blood. They sent the beautiful robe to their father with this message. Look at what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son? Their father recognized it immediately. Yes, he said. It is my son's robe. A wild animal must have eaten him. Joseph has clearly been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes and dressed himself in burlap. He mourned deeply for his son for a long time. His family all tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. I will go to my grave mourning for my son, he would say, and then he would weep. Meanwhile, the Midianite traders arrived in Egypt, where they sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was captain of the palace guard.
Right. Starting at 18, it says, when Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. Here comes the dreamer, they said. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him, then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. So essentially, you see that they were plotting to try to kill him, so his dream, to keep his dreams from coming to pass. But I think a point that I love is if God shows you something, you don't need to figure out how is this going to happen. You just got to know it's going to happen. And that's one thing I love about God. Like when he gives you a dream, listen, people could say you crazy. That ain't going to happen. No way. And in this case, they're like, we're going to kill him and then we'll see it happen. Let's see if it happens. But God didn't allow that to happen because if God showed it, if God, a dream essentially is a prophecy. If you take it from that perspective, a dream is a foreshadow of something that's going to happen. God is giving you a was from God, therefore it was going to happen. But I think the point is, the good news for us is if God showed you something or says he's going to do something, there's nobody that can get in the way of that. Even the Pharisees who killed Jesus, they thought we gonna kill him and then see, because he said tear down this temple and I'll build it in 3 days. And they're like, yeah, right, killed him, and he did just that because if he said it, then it's gonna happen. So.
Not only that, their evil scheme was actually a part of his plan to be elevated. So jokes on them.
That's good too. The enemy is actually same thing exactly. The devil through the Pharisees and these other people killed Jesus, and they think, yeah, now we'll see, king of the Jews, and then realize he actually, the Hebrew says he only by dying could he break the power of death. So like them killing Jesus was actually you're playing into you're playing into the plan and you don't realize it. And like you said, same thing. They're selling Joseph, but they don't realize this is actually going to fulfill how it's going to happen.
So Reuben is
like, it just shows you like basically when you're on your way to your calling or your blessing or whatever you want to call it, it doesn't start off nice. It's never sunshines and rainbows. You always got to be broken down and go through some things before you get to that place. And you can see that with a lot of these stories in the Bible, but this one in particular, it shows that.
I guess Reuben, verse 21, was not in the scheme. He hears the scheme, and then he says, let's not kill him. And then he has a plan to throw him in a cistern and maybe get him back later. And then and Joseph comes, they rip his clothes off, throw him in there, and then they see this caravan of people. They're like, you know what? Judah's like, you know what? Let's not kill him. Let's sell him. And then they sell him for 20 pieces of silver. And then Reuben comes back because he thinks he's still in the cistern. So he's going to take him back. He's going to get him later. Finds out he's not there. He was sold. And he's like, dang, bro. He's like, what will I do now? Because that was his plan. And ultimately, I guess he failed in that plan.
And I think one thing I want to emphasize too, that's I always say, if you see the Bible write something, there's a reason. In verse 24, it says, then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. It says, now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. So when you think about a well, I don't know if you guys have ever, like, I've never looked at one in person, but I've seen them like through movies and pictures. A well is really deep.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the idea that Joseph was thrown into a well that had no water in it and he didn't die, that goes to show you God sustained him. Because he's thrown into a well that has no water, and a well is deep, and he doesn't die. He doesn't die. And a well, if you ever looked at a picture of a well, they're dark.
Yeah.
They're very dark. And he's thrown in there, emphasizes that it was empty. There was no water in it, but he didn't die. And I think that's the provision, because I always say to people, when God has a call in your life, you cannot die before your time. When God has a call for your life, you will not die before your time, because God spoke something is going to happen. And they threw him in an empty cistern, but yet he didn't die. And this is then just as they were sitting down to eat, which goes to show you, you know, and how wicked they were. And obviously gives grace and forgiveness, but they throw their younger brother in this cistern and then they're eating. Could you imagine? And then just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain by killing our brother? We have to cover up the crime. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders." What I love about this is the Bible talks about it in Proverbs, and I don't know verbatim off the top of my head, but there's a proverb that basically talks about, and I'm paraphrasing, like the scheme that the enemy's planning for you, he's gonna fall in his own scheme. Like the trap the enemy has laid for you, he's gonna fall in his own trap. And so when you look at Luke 22, when the Pharisees and religious leaders are thinking of, they're like, it says they're trying to find a plan of how to kill Jesus. The Bible says Satan enters Judas, and then he goes to them and he gives them a plot, like, of how to do it. But what I'm saying, my point is, the devil, this is why we don't have to fear our enemies. The devil is the one who's driving their thoughts, that they're the things that they're doing, it's being driven by the devil, like our enemies. But they don't realize the thoughts that is being driven to them by the devil is actually in my favor. Because like you said, Joseph, his dream is going to be fulfilled while he's in Egypt. So they're sitting here and they get this stuff from the devil to sell him. Let's just sell him. Yeah, get rid of him. You don't realize you're actually shipping him to his destiny.
Yeah.
So this is why I say we shouldn't fear our enemies, because our enemies are actually playing a role in us, like in us fulfilling our destiny. They don't realize it. Like it's like when someone says you'll never amount to nothing, and then that motivates you to amount to something. Think you said it to put me down, but don't realize it inspired me. And now look at me. Now you're asking me for money. So it's like your enemies, in a sense, play a part in you reaching your destiny. And I think this is why you have to have a different perspective of how you look at your enemies. This is why God says, love your enemies. Because if anything, they played a part in this. Love your enemies. They played a part in this.
You love them because their persecution actually elevated you. That's actually that's a good perspective. You should thank them.
Because without your enemies, you would not, like, I'm really serious. Like, if you actually analyze, I can say this from my own life, and I'm sure you guys can say this if you look in your life and other people. LeBron's dad leaving him actually motivated him. So if he grew up with
things that we go through actually help us. I think he spoke about that too. It says persecution, hard times is a way to strengthen your faith.
Yeah, that's James 1.
So that's just a part of our growth, is these people who are persecuting, these people who are making your life difficult are actually helping you spiritually.
Because if you look at the story of Joseph, you see without his brothers doing this, that dream doesn't come to pass. Maybe it does, obviously, God will find a different way, but I'm just saying in the sense that it's already fulfilled. And you look at it, from the outside looking in now, his brothers had to do this for him. And that's why he's literally going to say that at the end of Genesis. He's like, you guys meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And this is why I say evil serves good. Evil serves good. Evil serves good. So the reality is, like I said, the point that I'm making there is just, we shouldn't look at our enemies as bad things. In a sense, your enemies ultimately,
Satan and the demons are under God's authority.
That's why I said even evil bows to God. Evil serves, they have to serve God's purpose.
Exactly. So when you think about the story of Job, Satan has to go to God and get direction from God to do bad things.
And this is why you're going to see in the book of Jude, it's only one chapter. It said, it was Peter who said this. He says in 2 Peter chapter 2, he says, he's talking about these false teachers. He said they are arrogant, daring even to scoff at supernatural beings without so much as trembling. But he says, but the angels who are far greater in power and strength do not dare bring from the Lord a charge of blasphemy against those supernatural beings. And you're going to see the same thing with Jude. In the book of Jude, he talked about how Michael just rebuked the devil, but he didn't blaspheme him. Because what the thing that people have to understand is evil serves good. So the devil needed to get permission from God to do what he did. So now if you blaspheme him in a sense, you have to understand that he had the permission to do it. So it's like if
Exactly.
you
That's
give
why it's
Michael,
change your
if you-
perspective on bad things.
yeah, you gotta change your perspective, because if Max gives Michael, a bag of chips, but then I'm rebuking him like, you don't have the right to have a bag of chips. You're supposed to be eating healthy. Well, the person that's in authority over his life said he could, but because you didn't know that, now you're ignorantly rebuking him, or you're ignorantly like calling him out, not knowing that he had permission. And it's the same thing. I always say, the devil can't do nothing without God's permission. Demons can't do nothing without God's permission. This is why I say there's something called legal rights. The demons understand legal rights. The devil understands legal rights. So he tempts you, but once you do it, I have legal rights. But the point is, when you blaspheme him, you have to understand that you can get yourself in more trouble blaspheming him, if he had permission to do what he did. That's basically the point I'm saying.
Exactly.
But these guys, in a sense, they're running with their thought process to sell Joseph, but it's needed to get him to Egypt. And so we see that. And I think we could pick up at 20, where is it at? 20, I'd say 28.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much he's sold. And then Reuben, like I said, comes back because he has plans to rescue Joseph. He doesn't know about the plans to sell him. And he goes, he finds him not there. And I think verse 31, I think Stanley spoke about that before, where they were dishonest. They didn't necessarily lie, but they were dishonest.
Oh, they lied.
Yeah,
I mean, technically they didn't lie.
but it's still considered like being dishonest.
That's what I'm saying. It was
Lying
dishonest.
the truth, basically.
No, the reason they lied is because you have to look. It is a lie. Look at 31. The brothers killed. They not only did they ripped his robe, but they killed a young goat and dipped Joseph's blood in the robe, his robe in the blood. I mean. But then look what it says in 32. That's the lie. They sent the robe to their father with this message. Look at what we found. You didn't find it. You did this. They lied. They lied. Doesn't this robe belong to your son? They did that and said they found that. So they did lie. Because they said they found it, but they didn't. They didn't.
But I think
find it.
I think the point is they're just trying to say it in a way where they wouldn't, like, they could say it in a way to make him believe something different than what it is. Because all he says is, like you said, he lied because they didn't find it. But he's like, without saying it, he assumes that he was killed by an animal.
They didn't lie. Yeah, they didn't say that that someone they didn't. I'm not saying they lied in terms of saying
they killed him.
Yeah, but I'm saying the lie was in terms of saying they found his robe. So it says their father recognized it immediately, and then he comes to this conclusion that a wild animal must have eaten him. And I think that's pretty much that. Then Jacob tears his clothes, and he refuses to be comforted. And but it says, meanwhile, the Midianite traders arrived in Egypt, where they sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was captain of the palace guard. So, like I said, we're seeing how, and obviously we know the story. So you see how, again, this is actually going to play a huge part in him getting to, and this is one thing I think I want to emphasize. This is why, like I always say, as long as you do your part, God got the
He's working.
This is why it's like, yo, man, when you start to see this, God's like, listen, Max, just do this. There's gonna be things that don't make sense in this process, but don't worry about that. Just do the thing I'm telling you to do. And as long as you do the thing you're gonna do, and that's what it is. Because why I'm saying this, we just highlighted earlier in 37 how you emphasize Joseph had integrity from the very beginning. Joseph's a hard worker from the very beginning, and that's the thing that's gonna get him noticed is his hard work. His hard work is going to bring God's favor, and God's favor upon him is what's going to get him noticed. But it all it comes down to, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, Joseph, my favor is upon you. It's the same thing in the New Testament. If you live by the word of God, you listen to the Holy Spirit, God's favor is going to be upon you, his blessings. But when you get away from listening to God, you
You don't
disobey
have
your
God's
conviction.
favor.
Now you don't have God's favor. So Joseph is like, just do what you're supposed to do. My favor's on you. If God's favor's on you, it's impossible for people not to notice you. It's impossible.
Because it says in everything he did, he succeeded.
Man.
So he couldn't miss at that point.
And what the thing that you see in this is who he sold to is a man of status.
Hmm. Yeah, you're in
And
the
that's why
rooms
that
that you
matters.
didn't know you would be in the rooms
You
of. You're meeting
man.
people that you didn't never thought you would meet, and that's not your doing. You just be consistent in who you are, and God will send you into rooms and send you into meetings of people who He wants you to be in the rooms for. And like you said, man, just be yourself, be consistent, and through that training process, you've molded this integrity, this work ethic, and just keep doing that. And then he has a test, and obviously we'll talk about that later. But we'll read Genesis 38.
For sure. All right, cool. So we'll go to the next section. Hold on.
If you want, you can break it down 15:15.
Cool. Let's do that.
Chapter 38, Judah and Tamar. About this time, Judah left home and moved to Adon, where he stayed with a man named Hira. There he saw a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua, and he married her. When he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and he named the boy Then she became pregnant again and gave birth to another son, and she named him Onan. And when she gave birth to a third son, she named him Shelah. At the time of Shelah's birth, they were living.
Then one of you guys have something playing in the background.
Yeah, Stan, I don't know if that's you.
To marry a young woman named Tamar. But was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to brother Onan, go and marry Tamar, as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died. You must produce an heir for your brother. But Onan was not willing to have a child who would.
Give me 1 second.
Probably not going to call it view model. Likely this would be called something like game. I'm going to leave it called view model so that as I use it in here, it'll be clear to you. Oh,
Hold on. This has. Give me 1 second. Something from work is playing. All right, I'll start it over.
All right.
Chapter 38, Judah and Tamar. About this time, Judah left home and moved to Adon, where he stayed with a man named Hira. There he saw a Canaanite woman, the daughter of Shua, and he married her. When he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and he named the boy Then she became pregnant again and gave birth to another son, and she named him Onan. And when she gave birth to a third son, she named him Shelah. At the time of Shelah's birth, they were living at Kezib. In the course of time, Judah arranged for his firstborn son to marry a young woman named Tamar. But was a wicked man in the Lord's sight, so the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to brother Onan, go and marry Tamar, as our law requires of the brother of a man who has died. You must produce an heir for your brother. But Onan was not willing to have a child who would not be his own heir. So whenever he had intercourse with his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground. This prevented her from having a child who would belong to his brother. But the Lord considered it evil for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother. So the Lord took Onan's wife too. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Shelah is old enough to marry you." But Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Shelah would also die like his two brothers. So Tamar went back to live in her father's home. Some years later, Judah's wife died. After the time of mourning was over, Judah and his friend Hira the Adullamite went up to Timnah to supervise the shearing of his sheep. Someone told Tamar, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for her to come and marry him. So she changed out of her widow's clothing and covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. Then she sat beside the road at the entrance to the village of Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. Judah noticed her and thought she was a prostitute, since she had covered her face. So he stopped and propositioned her. "Let me have sex with you," he said, not realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law.
Cool.
I think JR, you spoke about this before, where Judah marries it says a Canaanite woman.
Yes, that's
And
true. And
you could talk about it.
no, you can do it. You can do it.
Okay, so yeah, he marries a Canaanite woman, and we know that Jesus comes from the line of Judah, so it makes sense that Judah would have to marry someone in his family instead of people of Canaan, because we know that when it was time for Isaac to marry, his mom and his dad did not want him to marry the people in Canaan. So
But it was forbidden. I want to read that the Canaanites, they were forbidden to marry the Canaanites because they were not going. Where is that? I want to read that because God had told Abram that the Canaanites were not going to be a part of the covenant that he was making, because the chosen the covenant child was Isaac. And so God establishes a covenant with Abraham, and they ended up having Ishmael. So you're going to see in where is it at? This would be in Genesis chapter 17, starting at verses 17. Then Abraham bowed down to the ground, but laughed to himself in disbelief. "How could I become a father at age 100?" he thought. "And how can Sarah have a baby when she is 90 years old?" So Abraham said to God, "May Ishmael live under your special blessing." But God replied, "No, Sarah, your wife, will give birth to a son for you. You will name him Isaac, and he will confirm my covenant with him, and I will confirm my covenant with him and his descendants as an everlasting covenant. As for Ishmael, I will bless him also, just as you have asked. I will make him extremely fruitful and multiply his descendants. He will become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will be confirmed with Isaac, who will be born to you, and Sarah about this time next year." So he establishes a covenant with him, but that's not the one I'm looking for. There's the one where they're not supposed to marry the Canaanite women. I'm trying to remember where I had found that. Where's it at? Okay. Yeah, so there it is. Genesis 24. Abraham was now a very old man, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. One day, Abraham said to his oldest servant, the man in charge of his household, "Take an oath by putting your hand under my thigh. Swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not allow my son to marry one of these local Canaanite women. Go instead to my homeland, to my relatives, and find a wife there for my son Isaac." So now the point I'm remembering now is the Canaanites were people who they worshipped other gods. And you're going to see later God's going to tell Solomon, you can marry any woman except for the foreign women, because they're going to turn your hearts to their gods, which eventually happens. When he marries them, he ends up worshiping other gods. So the Canaanites, this is why you're going to see God also said to Joshua and the Israelites, don't practice. Moses told them, don't practice the worship stuff that these people are doing. That's why they're being driven out of Canaan, and you guys are being given Canaan. So my point is, the Canaanites worshipped other gods. So because they worshipped other gods, one thing about love will make you do crazy things. So God, you're gonna, and this is why incest was allowed in these times in terms of like cousins and stuff like that. Because Isaac and basically all these guys, even Abraham, they married people they were related to, but it was for the set. It was because they worshiped the same God. So if you married someone who doesn't worship the same God as you, like I said, love has a way of blinding us. Love has a way of turning us to do things that, like, even if you think about before, when we didn't love Jesus and we didn't have a relationship with him, we lived in the world. We did what we wanted. But why don't we do that now? Love. Jesus says in John 14, those who love me will obey my commands. So we don't like not do certain things because we don't want to. Our flesh still desires these things, but out of love, we don't do it. So my point is, the Israelites married each other. Like, people, even though we're related, to marry each other because they worship the same God. So the point is, now because Judah married a Canaanite woman, and you see it automatically, his son is wicked. His other son does something that's considered wicked. But the point is, if he would have, if one of his sons would have like basically had that daughter with Tamar, then the problem is in the prophecy that we're going to see in Genesis 49, which is that the scepter is not going to leave the hand of Judah until it's in the hands of the one that it's supposed to be in, which is Jesus. Then we have a problem because the lineage, Jesus came from the line of Judah. That would have changed had Judah not been the one to get Tamar pregnant, because you're going to see she gives birth to Perez and to Zerah. And when you look in Matthew chapter 1, Perez is the continuation of the line of Judah to get to Jesus. So the point of emphasis is basically it had to come from the line of Judah, and it wasn't going to come through the Canaanite bloodline. But I think that's what
you see. Abraham marries his relative, Isaac marries his cousin, and then Jacob marries his cousin. Then Isaac and Jacob, their parents didn't want them to marry Canaanite women. So now we get to Judah, and he does, and then God in his providence makes her pass away, and then we'll read about what happens later. But I think you got to the point. So he marries a Canaanite woman. They have 3 sons. He arranges a marriage to Miss Tamar, and because was a wicked person, God just takes his life. And then the second son, by law, is supposed to marry Tamar and have a child, a heir for his brother, and that's adopted into the laws of Moses. You'll see, and they even ask Jesus the question, because that's a part of the law. What happens to your wife if you marry multiple times? The brothers, who's going to be their wife in heaven? Jesus says that we won't have any husbands or wives in heaven. So the point is, part of the law of the time is the brother has to marry the wife of his brother if he passes away, and have a kid for him. And it says that he was not willing to have a kid, so he just wanted to smash pretty much and not fulfill his duty by law. And God, seeing that, in verse 10, he considered it evil to deny a child to his brother, breaking the law, so he dies as well. And you could go ahead.
That's 15. That's up to 15.
We're at 11. Yeah, 11. We're at 11, but you can go to 15. 16, actually.
But I just wanted to say one thing about this. You guys see it as like God seeing the heart posture of Onan.
Yeah, because it says earlier.
It's not really more the material thing. It's more like his heart posture. He had it like it was an evil thing he had in his heart to do. And you know how we say that God looks at your heart more than the actual physical thing. He looks at your heart. So like you could commit a sin right inside of your heart before you even do anything. So like I think that's the part that really pissed God off. Do you guys see it that way?
Yeah, verse 9 says, Onan was not willing to have a child that would not be his own heir. So like in the beginning, he doesn't have any motivation to do it, but he's still smashing.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't want to do it, but you're smashing. So God says that it's evil.
okay. So what's next?
Verse 11, it says Tamar goes back to her parents' house because Judah says that he's going to give his third son when he's old enough, but it says he didn't really intend to do it. He just didn't want his last son to die like his first two sons. So he's trying to finesse her into like, yeah, I'll let you know, like never with the intention of letting her know.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a funny guy right now. And then verse 12 says Judah's wife dies, and that goes into the plan that we were talking about before. And then he goes into the field. Somebody tells Tamar that he's in the field, and she's like, yo, he owes me something, so let me try to finesse him, because he told me he'll let me know, and he never let me know. So now I got to find out what's going on. And that's what she does in verse 14. It says Tamar was aware that Sheila had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for her to come marry him. She's like, what's going on? You got to remember, in this time, women were never esteemed unless they had a husband or a son. You look at the story of Ruth, where her husband and her sons die, she becomes poor. And you see here, Tamar, she is living in her parents' house for so many years, waiting, and she still has this clothes of mourning on, widow clothes on. That shows that she has low esteem, and she will never get esteem until she gets a husband. So she's super motivated to either get pregnant or get a husband. One way or another, she's gonna get her deliverance, and she just takes it into her own hands to do it. Because if a woman doesn't have a man in this society, she's nothing.
Right.
So,
it's as equivalent as you stealing from someone in today, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
it's like money.
exactly. She's like, yo, you owe me your son, and you told me you're gonna let me know when he's ready, and you never told me. So now they're telling me you're in the town, so I'm gonna see you. I'm gonna see what's up, and either I'm gonna get pregnant, have a son, or I'm gonna marry your son. And she goes, and I guess she looks like a prostitute. His wife just died, so he's going through something, and he sees her, doesn't realize it's her, and he's like, what's up? Low moment. You feel me? He's like,
well, one thing I will say though is in verse 11, where it says, then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, go back to your parents' home and remain a widow until my son Sheila is old enough to marry you. But Judah but it goes on to say, but Judah didn't really intend to do this because he was afraid Sheila would also die, like his two brothers. I think, like Stanley said, God looks at your heart. He can see your intentions. And I think whenever you are planning something, that's wrong, God has a way of making things even, because the Bible says in Proverbs, he doesn't like uneven scales. Yeah. So like if you're doing something with the motive of not really, like basically you're doing something where you're going to get the dub or you get the better end of the stick. But it shouldn't be like that, because the Bible says God sends the rain on the just and unjust. So even in that, it's even. And like we get it. He had to fear his son would die, and I think that's where God's grace came in for him, because obviously, like the other guy, he didn't really have a reason. It's just his motive is wicked. I don't want this son to not be mine. But in Judah's case, he doesn't want his son to die. It's his last son, but still his motive was wrong, and that's why ultimately you're going to see how this story turns around in her favor. So I always say, like, don't try to understand what everything. Just do what it is that God is telling you to do. Because I think in his fear, he did something, like he basically lied out of fear. And I always say, whenever you do anything out of fear, it's always going to be something that's like wrong. Because that's the thing about fear. Never make decisions out of fear. You want to be calm, collect, and when you make decisions. But if you make decisions out of fear, you're going to always make the wrong decision. And out of fear of losing his last son, he lies. And ultimately, God's going to correct that. Because you're the same thing with Jacob. You think about Jacob, his dad. Out of fear that Esau was going to kill him, he left the land he was supposed to actually be on. That's why ultimately he has to go back. Because now that the blessing's on Jacob, you need to be in the promise area. Like you have to be here. Like this is for God's word that he spoke to be fulfilled. You need to be in that land. But out of fear, he left. And then he ends up going through some hard years and he gets the seed from Laban, his uncle, and then ultimately he goes back. But my point is, whenever you make decisions out of fear, you're always going to end up getting the worst end of the stick, because you don't make decisions out of fear. You have to make them out of being spirit-led. You heard from God, you're calm and collect. But when you get fearful, you're going to do things, that ultimately, like I said, are not going to be good. So don't make decisions out of fear. So he lied out of fear.
Mhm.
You guys have anything else from that?
I think we can finish the rest of it.
I mean, just one thing, while all this is happening, it's all meant to happen, like you pointed out, right? This is supposed to happen, because if this doesn't happen, it kind of screws up with history, right? So,
Yep.
like you kind of see like the good works with the bad in a sense.
Yep.
And it's beautiful to watch that. Like you can look at it and be like, no, what are you doing? This and that, but it all works together for the greater good. So like that helps me have perspective whenever you see a bad situation. If you take a step back, like if you could see the full picture, you'd see it's a puzzle to a bigger, a greater situation. That's what I'm seeing here. Is like, it just reminds you, like, all these situations that come up in your life or, any other life, it's a piece of the puzzle, whether it's good or bad.
That's true. And we can all attest to that. The hardest times in our life birth the most fruitful times that we're still
Right.
living off of. So that's just how life works.
Mm-hmm.
But if nothing else, you can read the rest.
Right.
How much will you pay to have sex with me? Tamar asked. I'll send you a young goat from my flock, Judah promised. But what will you give me to guarantee that you will send a goat? She asked. What kind of guarantee do you want? He replied. She answered, leave me your identification seal and its cord and the walking stick you are carrying. So Judah gave them to her. Then he had intercourse with her, and she became pregnant. Afterward, she went back home, took off her veil, and put on her widow's clothing, as usual. Later, Judah asked his friend Hira the Adullamite to take the young goat to the woman and to pick up the things he had given her as his guarantee. But Hira couldn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there, where can I find the shrine prostitute who was sitting beside the road at the entrance to Enaim? We've never had a shrine prostitute here, they replied. So Hira returned to Judah and told him, I couldn't find her anywhere, and the men of the village claimed they've never had a shrine prostitute there. Then let her keep the things I gave her, Judah said. I sent the young goat as we agreed, but you couldn't find her. We'd be the laughing stock of the village if we went back again to look for her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has acted like a prostitute, and now because of this, she's pregnant. Bring her out and let her be burned. But as they were taking her out to kill her, she sent this message to her father-in-law. The man who owns these things made me pregnant. Look closely. Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these? Judah recognized them immediately and said, she is more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son Shelah. And Judah never slept with Tamar again. When the time came for Tamar to give birth, it was discovered that she was carrying twins. While she was in labor, one of the babies reached out his hand. The midwife grabbed it and tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist, announcing, this one came out first. But then he pulled back his hand, and out came his brother. What? The midwife exclaimed. How did you break out first? So he was named Phew. Then the baby with the scarlet string on his wrist was born, and he was named Zerah.
So this is the interesting part of it. It goes back to how you judge will be the amount you will get back in judgment. So so he sleeps with her, pays for it, and then he gives her a guarantee that she's using ultimately to shame him later. His identification seal, and then she gets pregnant, and then she goes home and she acts like nothing happened, and then they go try to find her. They can't find her, and then it says she gets pregnant, and then it says about 3 months later, Judah was told to Tamar, your daughter-in-law was acting like a prostitute now because she's pregnant. Bring her out and let her be burned. Judah demanded, and this goes back to the woman, the adulterous woman, because she's caught in adultery, but the man doesn't have to pay the same consequence. So it's like she wasn't sleeping with herself. So it's just like, oh, let's stone her. Well, are you going to stone the man too? No, let's just stone her. All right. So by default, you guys are incorrect. So it's kind of like here, he has so much judgment on this woman, yet he was the one in the act. So it's not let's burn her and the man. It's let's burn her.
Right.
He has to be humbled.
Yeah, that's a good lesson, like to get, to not be too harsh, because like the second you find out, like it's the same thing with like David, right?
Exactly.
When he was, giving out judgment, and it was on his own self. It was like, oh, I would have been more lenient if I knew that.
Exactly. And I think we spoke about it also with Jacob and his wife. That you let whoever has it die or something like that. He doesn't know that his wife has the idol. So I think this is a lesson we learn, because it's funny because we change our energy depending on who it is.
Right.
If I know them or they're my kids, let's take it light. But if it's someone else's kids, let's go harsh. And God
Right.
knows that. So he's like, you know what? You must have compassion. Jesus said, have compassion on everyone because God has compassion on everyone. You can't have compassion on one and not the other. Have grace on everyone, not just the people that, you feel me? And that's why he says lend to everybody, not just the people that you like or your family or you know are gonna pay you back. He says lend to everyone. So I think it goes back to that. It's good.
Yeah.
And then he's humbled in verse 26. She is more righteous than I am because I didn't arrange for her to marry my son. And Judah never slept with Tamar again. So he had to be humbled, and he got off pretty light, if you ask me. He was gonna have her burned, but he got off pretty light. And then I think the rest of it signifies the favor of Perez, because he's not supposed to be first, but by God's favor, he comes out first. And I think that signifies something, because he's going to be the ancestor.
No, the thing is, he didn't come out first. The Zerah came out first, because any part of your body that came out, that would have signified first. But it goes to this happens because I said, if you look from starting at Isaac, it goes back to Isaac. God promises Abraham a child, but in their disobedience or in their lack of trust that God was going to do it, they had Ishmael. And so what happens is the oldest ends up serving the youngest, and it starts from Isaac to Ishmael all the way down. You're going to see that Isaac ends up being younger than Ishmael, but Ishmael's going to serve Isaac. When you go from Isaac and Ishmael, you have Jacob and Isaac has Jacob and Esau. Esau is older than Jacob, but yet Jacob's the one who gets the blessing. When you think about with these two kids, it's the same thing. You're going to see that Perez was not the one who came out first, but he's going to be first in rank because it's the same continuation of you see the oldest serving the youngest. David was the youngest of his brothers. Moses was the youngest. Aaron and Miriam, his two other siblings, were older than him. But you see a consistency throughout this, leading all the way up to Jesus, that the oldest serves the youngest. And so by default, Zerah did come out first because they put the red hand on and she declared. She put the scarlet on his hand and she declared. She announces this one came out first. But then he pulled back his hand and out came his brother. So in a sense, the brother came out, he came out like when he may have not fully came out, but in terms of the first one who came out, because his hand came out, that would have made him first in terms of coming out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So you don't see
it's a continuity.
You don't see how it says, he says, how did you break out first? You don't see that as being first?
What does his name mean?
Because
Perez means breaking out, and Zerah means scarlet or brightness.
Or brightness.
Perez means breaking out.
I think JR's point is the fact that his hand was out first technically makes him first.
Because the only reason I say that is because you're gonna see in Genesis 49, it's the same thing. When Jacob goes to bless Joseph's two sons, Joseph's like, no, you're blessing the younger one. You're giving the younger one the blessing. He's like, no, you got it because he did this. So Joseph tries to correct him, but then Jacob says, I know that this is the younger one. I know. So you're gonna see from Ishmael and Isaac leading up, it's like the younger one is the lead and the older one serves the younger one every time. You see that until we get to Jesus. You just see that continuation. And like David's the youngest. You think about in this story with these two sons, and you're going to see with Joseph's sons, it's the same thing. I've always seen it when you look at Ishmael and Isaac, that started this continuation where the older serves the younger one. And you see that. So like I said, he eventually fully came out before the other one fully came out. But in terms of who broke something out first, it still would have been Zerah because his body part came out first. Not entirely, but his body part. Like if you say who's came out first in terms of just anything, it would have been Zerah because his hand came out and she put the scarlet. So he still wouldn't have been the one who fully came out first. But in terms of who broke out, who put something out first is Zerah. It would have been Zerah.
Yeah.
And what you see with Perez, he ends up passing him. But who came out first would have been Zerah. Would have been Zerah. And like I say, it's a continuation. The same way, one of the things that you see is very similar is from Jacob. I mean, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is they all married like people they were related to. That's something you see that's very similar as well. Even Esau, after Jacob went to marry one of his cousins, Esau ends up going on his dad's side and marries a cousin on that side. But you see a lot of similarities starting from Abraham and his two children leading all the way up to Joseph's children and so on and so forth.
That's true.
Makes sense.
So I think we can knock out 39 if you guys don't have nothing else.
All right, sounds good.
Chapter 39, Joseph in Potiphar's house. When Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a thing except what kind of food to eat. Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. "Come and sleep with me," she demanded. But Joseph refused. "Look," he told her, "my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held back nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God." She kept putting pressure on Joseph day after day, but he refused to sleep with her, and he kept out of her way as much as possible. One day, however, no one else was around when he went in to do his work. She came and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, "Come on, sleep with me." Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house. When she saw that she was holding his cloak and he had fled, she called out to her servants. Soon all the men came running. "Look," she said, "my husband has brought this Hebrew slave here to make fools of us. He came into my room to rape me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream, he ran outside and got away, but he left his cloak behind with me." She kept the cloak with her until her husband came home. Then she told him her story. "That Hebrew slave you brought into our house tried to come in and fool around with me," she said. "But when I screamed, he ran outside, leaving his cloak with me."
That's crazy. You know why that's
Mm.
crazy? Because this, you start to see everything that happens today already happened. You know how many women, and I'm not gonna say every woman who's claimed to be raped wasn't. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a lot of cases you'll see where they'll cry rape, and then 20 years later, 15 years later, say I lied. But no one, everyone always believes it. They always believe it, and you see it even here. No one interviewed
I mean,
Joseph.
that's his
No one.
wife. That's his wife.
No man.
So it's just
That's
like
crazy.
your wife, bro. Like, how are you gonna? You can't not choose your wife's side. You feel me? So he's in a tough situation. He's like, "Damn, this is my best worker, but sheesh, that's my wife." Imagine his marriage if he chooses Joseph.
No, I'm not saying to just choose them, but I'm saying like there was no interview, there was no
I
asking.
know, and that's why
I
Paul.
think I think that's the danger for me. I feel like a woman can just cry rape and it could be true, it could be false, but I feel like no one ever investigates the guy's perspective. It's
It's
kind of
such
like
an
if she
emotional
said it,
thing, and that's why
yeah,
Paul says whenever you accuse a church leader, make sure there's 2 or 3 um,
witnesses.
witnesses, because I mean, these kind of
Exactly.
accusations make or break you.
Exactly.
But
Yeah, that's such a gray area for sure. But
It's like in this case, there was no witnesses. Because when she accused
yeah,
him, there was
it's
no one
he
there.
say
That's what
she
I'm saying.
yeah,
is a
it's
he
tough.
say she thing, man.
It's tough, and I think you just take those kind of things to prayer and allow God to
Yeah,
direct you, because
Exactly.
you can't because the thing is, if you take her side and you accuse him now, like, you, I don't know if you can fix that. You feel me? Like, you can really ruin someone, but if you don't choose her side, you literally ruin your marriage. And on top of that, she might be true, she might be right. So can you imagine she's right and you don't believe her? That would be
yeah.
terrible.
It's tough either way, man.
But you don't even touch that type of thing, you just go straight to God.
Yeah, for sure. I think the default is he did the right thing by believing his wife. I mean,
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, it's tough to not do that. You feel me? It's tough to not do that. But in the end, he was wrong.
that's why I'm saying this is a bad situation that ends
But
up
I
being.
think one thing that I think it's not really bad. I think when you the Joseph, it gives you an option. As long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, nothing is bad. The murder, it's all good in the end. Looking at that, in the end,
Yeah,
hindsight
in
becomes
the
2020.
moment
You'll
it
be
looks
able
bad
to
though.
see, yeah, in a moment.
But
But I
in the
think
big
that's what I love
picture,
about this story. It gives some perspective.
So I'll start at the top. Verse 2, we call this the favor of God. It says, the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the house of the Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, he giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal assistant. He put him in charge of everything in his household and everything he owned. For the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's house for Joseph's sake. All of his household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administration responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a thing except what kind of food to eat. So we spoke about when you do what you got to do, you receive the favor of God, and everything you do will succeed. And not only will everything you do will succeed, whoever is employing you is going to have success. It's the overflow of favor. And that's what he noticed. And once he noticed, he's like, yo, whatever, for some reason, every time he touches something, I get richer. So you know what? I'm going to have him touch everything. And that's where the favor of God allows for you to be promoted. Because they're like, I'm going to give you more responsibility because for some reason, you can't miss. So you're going to do everything. So that way nothing misses. And that's where you become, that's when you get the promotions, because he's benefiting on something he had no hand in. You can benefit in something without even having the favor. You just buy the person with favor. And I think we spoke about this before. This is why we want to have friends and family members with favor. And we want to be the person with favor so that our friends and family members can benefit. And then if you have 2 or 3 people with favor, now can you imagine how much favor you have?
And what is good about this in verses 2, as you said, it's an add. It says the Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. So like, don't get it twisted. Like, people got to understand it's not God's favor just on me. I'm not really working hard, but God's favor just on me. No, that's not how that works. Because you're working hard, you're doing the right thing. Now God's favor is upon you. And I want to bring a verse to show this, because we see that for Joseph did, but there's a verse in Colossians chapter 3. I'll read verses 22 to 24. It says, slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything you do. Try to please them all the time, not just when they're watching you, which Joseph did because he had integrity when his master wasn't there. It says, serve them sincerely because of your reverent fear of the Lord. It says, work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember, the Lord will give you an inheritance as a reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. But if you do what is wrong, you will be paid back for the wrong you have done, for God has no favorites. So the point is, he's working for Potiphar as if he's working for the Lord. He's serving, and because he's serving with that kind of a mindset, that kind of an attitude, that's why the Lord's favor is upon him. And I think it's an emphasis, because a lot of times we want to be rich, but we don't want to work. A lot of times we want God's favor, but we don't want to live according to the word of God. We don't want to obey our conviction. So like, I got to make sure I put a pin that someone doesn't misinterpret favor for just, well, something's different about me, and that's why I have favor. You love to obey God, and you love to do it his way, and that's why you have his favor. But don't get it twisted. You're not just getting favor and you live any kind of way. You're not getting favor and you do, a half, job. No, you get favor because you listen to God, you obey God, you do what he says to do. And God says, because you obey me, because you do it my way, I'm going to give you more success. You guys both have children. If your children listen to you, they're going to have favor. You're going to want to bless him with a car at 16. You're going to want to make sure he goes to the good high school and the good college. You're going to want to do these things because you say, man, this kid listens. Man, he's a standout student. Man, but if this kid's bad, you're not giving him these things. If he's bad, you're going to make sure he has everything he needs, but that's it. He's living on the bare minimum. He's not getting extra stuff. Not you don't get favor and you're just being bad. So
That's
this guy,
true.
I think its emphasis, it says God was with him and he succeeded as he served in the home
And I
of an
think going back
Egyptian.
to the point of serving, his promotion, he didn't ask for it. I think
It came.
Jesus says, when you come to a dinner, sit in a dishonorable seat and allow someone to elevate you.
That's
If you
right,
elevate
man.
yourself, you may be embarrassed because someone more honorable may come and they make you sit at the dishonorable seat and everybody's going to see it. So here, listen, if you have the favor of God, you're doing what you got to do. It says right here, it says here, it says that this pleased Potiphar. So, verse 4. So as soon as he made Joseph his personal assistant, he put him in charge of the entire household he owned. It says he noticed. Oh yeah, verse 3. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him this is everything he did. So they're gonna notice, and it's not your job to elevate yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this what you
And the
guys
reason,
about basically reminds me of Psalms 1. I just wanted to point that out because we're talking about favor on people, and Psalms 1 literally tells you the people who will have favor upon their life are the ones that meditate on the word day and night, that delight in the law of the Lord, like Jared was saying. So you see Joseph has this favor, and it's not just because, oh, random, I just want to pick you. It's more of like he had an obedience to his father. He tended his sheep. He was a person of integrity. He didn't follow in the footsteps of the wicked, like Psalms 1 is telling you. So that's kind of what you see here.
What were you gonna say,
and
JR?
one thing I want to point out is because the verse you just read, which was verses 3, where it says Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. That's why I say that the service, the acts of service is so important, because when you say, okay, he noticed, how would he have noticed? Okay, an example for someone I would say, how did he notice? When you have God's favor, things that everyone is trying to do, things that everyone tried to do that they couldn't do it, when you do it, it works. For example, it's like no one can open this bin. Joseph goes to open it, it opens. No, we could never get these things to plant. Like the fruits never go from this tree. All right, Joseph, he waters it, he tends to it. Now there's fruits going. That means they begin to see, like, yo, everything he does, it's working. That's why. But you see, if he's not working, you can't notice that there's a difference. But because he's working, you're seeing, he's having success where everyone else failed. That's where they can notice this is favor. So, but if you see, if he's not working, and this is why I tell people, you gotta work, and God is really driving that home in this season in my life, is you have to work like you're working for me, because that's how people will be able to see I'm with you. Because they're gonna, we've been here 10 years and no one has ever been able to get fruit to grow from that tree. But when he showed up and started watering that tree, tending to it, fruit is growing. No one was able to, everyone fishes in that lake and no one has ever caught fish. He went and fished over there. That's what happened with Peter and when his encounter with Jesus. Throw your nets on the right side. We was out all night. No way, but that's favor because you obeyed me. Watch this. And then he catches all this fish. Favor. No one catches fish in the daytime. Fishers fish at night. Favor. But you see, he noticed this is favor because this doesn't happen. You don't catch this amount of fish. Better yet, even in the daytime, you don't catch any fish. Not only did I catch a fish, I caught plenty. He noticed the favor. So I'm saying, when you talk about being able to notice favor, that's because you're working, you're obeying God, and that's what allows people to see God as with you. But I keep saying we got to get to a point where we realize the acts of service are so important. They're so important. But we want favor, but we don't want to obey. We want to be rich, we want to be wealthy Christians, but we don't want to work the seed.
And I think, and another point is, to your point, service. He learned integrity. He learned hard work from his parents, doing things the right way when he was with his brothers. Although it probably went against culture because, like, he's snitching on us. But in the end, he's doing the right thing, and he's working with integrity, and that's going to serve him well now, because that's going to contribute to his favor, but also it's going to keep his hands clean whenever he comes towards this test of integrity.
That's a good point you made. I want to add on that because I think I had an experience with that at work where like I would see like this guy, like some of the guys that would drive down, like because like where they have this park at the top of the hill, and then we have to walk at the bottom of the hill to go inside. But I would see some of the guys would drive their car down the hill to get their stuff and then drive it back up. So I remember I did it. But then for some weird reason, the dispatcher never said nothing to nobody. But when I did it, he was like, yo, park your car up there and then walk down. He's like, you're wasting time when you drive the car down, then get your stuff and then have to drive your car back up to walk back down and get your car, the truck. He's like, yo, but in my mind, I'm like, yo, he didn't say that to no one but me. But then God hit me. He was like, you gotta get it, JR. Your job isn't to look at what these guys are doing. If they had already told, because before I got hired, they told me park your truck up there. But because I saw the other guys kind of like coming down here and doing this thing, it's like, well, if they're doing it, screw it. But God's like, don't look at what they're doing. Do what you were told. And I think what you mentioned with Joseph, you could imagine he's a younger brother. His older brothers are screwing around. He could have just been like, I'm gonna just follow what they're doing. But nope, he had integrity. And my point in saying that is in that process of preparation, when we're being molded by God, it's so important that you don't look at other people. Because sometimes that's what slays you. You're looking, well, they're taking the red light, screw it. Well, they're coming in 3 hours late, screw it. But God's like, you missed it, bro. I put that in front of you to see what are you gonna do. They're doing the wrong thing, but are you going to do the right thing? Because you doing the right thing is ultimately what determines if God can use you. But if you're failing in the season of preparation, then you're not going to be elevated because you're failing behind the scenes. Well, if you're failing behind the scenes, there's no reason for me to put you on the scene because you're just going to fail. So the reality is don't look at what others are doing. And it goes to that integrity you talked about with Joseph. From a young age at 17, he had integrity. He looked at what his brothers were doing, but still chose to do the opposite. And that integrity ultimately is going to play a huge role in him, or a huge part in him becoming second in command. So I think that's the point I had to drive home.
So it says in verse 6, Stan, you have anything else?
No, that was it. Pretty much it.
Okay, so verse 6, he's a handsome man, well built, so he's a good looking guy. And now the test starts where it says, so Potiphar, his wife, soon to begin to look at him lustfully. Come and sleep with me, she demands. So now the test of integrity, everything he's built from earlier, doing things the right way, he has to test to do things the right way. He's being used by Potiphar, and now he has a decision to make. He's going to do the right thing or the wrong thing. It says he refused because of the fact that his master trusts him and everything.
But then what Stanley said, fear of God, verse 9.
The fear of God, exactly. And he says that there too. He says, he held back nothing from me. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God, not against Potiphar. I mean, obviously, he would sin against Potiphar because Potiphar trusted him, but ultimately, he would be letting God down.
Right. Yeah, that means like that's the beautiful thing, man. Joseph is a great example of like what he understands what the fear of God looks like is. And I think that's what we have to take that as an example. Like anytime you face a temptation, I think it's good to just reiterate, like, I can't do this because of it'll be a sin against God, like, like something like that, like just talking to yourself, letting you know why I can't do it, even if I want to. And just understanding the fear of God is really what keeps me from doing things, and the love of God as well. Because you can see Joseph has an ultimate respect, not only for God, but also his master. You know what I'm saying? And that's really what keeps him from doing that.
And I think it goes back to your point, the fear of God. He understands that there's favor on him. He's like, how could I, after being sold, do this and slap God in the face? Essentially, he's giving me all this favor, and I'm gonna do this. That means like, dang, man, like I did all this for you, and you're gonna do that to me? But he
Right.
feels some type of way about that. He's like, nah, God's done so much for me, all I've been through. I can't do that to him. You feel me? And I
Yeah.
think we can all resonate that in our lives. Like, dang, I got food, people don't got food. I got housing, people don't have housing. And I'm gonna turn around and slap him in the face like that. Like, nah, I can't do that. And that's more so you're not doing something off of love in a relationship. It's like, nah, I can't do that, bro. Like, I gotta do things the right way because everything he's done for me. And I think
Right.
I think Joseph's in that situation. He's like, yo, he's like, yo, I got a promotion. I'm doing well. I can't do that to God, bro. Look at everything God's done for me.
Yeah, he says he says no one here has more authority than I do. Like he's like, dude, I'm blessed.
Exactly.
Like God is good, man. Why would I turn around and slap him in the face?
And you'll see in the book of prophets, God says to Israel, he's like, yo, I blessed you guys with fruits and vineyards, and I made your yards fruitful. You guys got fat, and then when you got fat, you rejected me. Because like sometimes when you get to a place of prosperity, that breeds pride, and you forget God is the reason for your prosperity. So it's like, oh, I don't need to pray for it anymore. I don't need to worship God anymore. I don't got time for that. I got all these things that God has given me. And then that's when God has to be like, wow, I did all this for you. Like he's like, yo, I rescued you out of Egypt, and this is how you repay me. You feel me? You're so quick to forget. God fed them with manna and quail, and then they just turn around and slap him in the face. He's like, yo, are you serious? So it's just like sometimes when we have that favor, we have to always remember where we get it from. That way we
True.
don't reject God in the prosperity days, because it's easy to find God in the need days. But when your stomach is full, that's when it's hard to find God.
Right.
Your house got full of food.
And I
you don't
think
got
this
nothing
is
to pray
why
about.
this is why I think I look at it one of two ways. Suffering is needed in the life of a Christian to keep you, at the feet of God. Unfortunately, if there isn't suffering of some type, just the human nature of how we are built,
Yep.
you will forget God. So I look at it like, okay, you can have suffering, to where you have everything, but you have suffering here and there. But I think if you're going to be someone who's a Christian who's going to be wealthy, because I believe you can be possible to be wealthy as a Christian, I think there's a process before you get to that place. And I think Joseph's
That's
story
the
shows
Bible verse
because
for that.
by the time Joseph's going to get wealthy, he's come so far. Like
Yep.
he's seen it all, man. He's been wrong. He's been sold.
Yeah.
It's like his relationship with God is so cemented. It's like at this point, the prosperity won't do anything good. But I think that's why I said like it's better when you wait on God, because like God, once God knows I got your heart, he's like, now I can bless you because these things won't mean nothing to you because I've got your heart. But I think if he doesn't have your heart and then he blesses you with abundance, what
Now you don't
happens
need
now is
him.
you get and because you never had a cemented relationship with him anyways, now it's going to be extremely hard. And that's the story of the rich man. He didn't know God and he's already rich. Nah, I'm not willing to give it up.
And I think
Whereas the other guys, go ahead.
it goes back to what Paul said. He said, I've done all these things in my
I
ministry,
learned.
but he said, God has given me a thorn to keep me from being proud. You feel me? He's boasting about all the things God is doing. He's in the third heavens. He's doing everything. He's turning Gentiles into Christians. He's doing all these things. But then he says, you know what? There's from all of that thing I'm doing in my ministry, but God gave me a thorn from keeping me from being proud, because when you're doing such great ministry, you can start to think that it's you. So Paul says, I had this amazing ministry, but God has given me a thorn to keep me from being proud. And he prays 3 times for God to take it away, but he says, no, this is
My
what you're gonna have
grace
this. Exactly. He says, you're gonna have this thorn forever because I need it to humble you in this amazing ministry you have. So like, just like you said, you can have money, you have this, you have that, but God's always gonna have something in your life that keeps you humble if you're a child of God. Because we need it. Like you said, human nature Man, when their stomachs is full, man, we're not praying about food. We're not praying about provision. We're not praying about favor. We're not praying about those things when our stomach is full. So sometimes God has to throw a wrench in there to get you to, hey, remember me? Oh, okay. You feel me?
And there's a Bible verse that talks about that. I can't remember the verse, but it says, God, the Christians that are rich, God humbled them. So like
James chapter 5.
Verses.
Try James 5. No, not James 5. It's James 1 verses 9. No, verses 10. James 1 verses 10.
Let me see. James 1. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, James 1 verses 10 says, I'll read 9 too. It says, believers who are poor have something to boast about, for God has honored them. It says, and those who are rich should boast that God has humbled them. They will fade away like a little flower in the field. So that just shows you, like Jared's right. If you ever see a Christian that's rich, a true Christian that's rich, let me emphasize that, a true believer, a true son or daughter of God that's rich, they have gone through the furnace and the fire.
Yep.
They know, they have the fear of God, like everything's put together. Because without that, they'd fall into all these times of temptation, bro. It's too much. The more money you get, the more temptations you get, bro.
Yep,
So,
more access.
yeah, more access. You literally could do whatever you want, the more money you get. So like, if you don't go through that furnace and build that discipline and that wisdom and that fear of God and stuff like that, then there's no chance.
Because it goes back to what you were talking about and you having your situation with the fear of God. When you have those things established in your life, God not gonna give you all the money in the world. You're like, nah, I got the fear of God. I know better.
Like I've been through some things. I ain't going back. Yeah, man, that's true, man. That's true. Like he shows you, like, yeah, man, you gotta use your money for the poor, or else, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna take it away. You know, like I'm not giving this to you just to hold it for yourself and kick back.
And
no.
I always tell people, like, I remember I did a teaching on can Christians be rich? I said, yeah, but if you are truly a Christian who's mature, you're gonna really understand you're just a manager of the money. Because you're just a vessel who God can entrust, knowing you're gonna do the right thing to bless others. But it's never gonna just be it's my money, I'm chilling, living in a yacht. No, you're gonna be using the money to bless others.
That's what he says. Paul says to Timothy, he says, teach the rich
to
you have to be rich in good works. He says the more money you have, the more generous you should be. So like you said, he's not giving you money to, obviously he says he's going to bless you for everything you need for your enjoyment. So obviously a byproduct of having money is you're going to have stuff. But the point of getting the money is so that you have a higher expectation of your generosity, of your ministry, and of your good works in the community.
It's good.
So then, so he's a handsome man. His wife looks at him. She's like, come sleep with me. He's like, I can't do that to God. And then day after day, she's pressuring him, but he's refusing.
I want to put a pin there too. I want to put a pin there because in verses 7, where it describes Joseph's physique and all that, it says, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. The point I want to make is lust starts with the eyes. This is why Jesus changed paradigm switch. He says, the law says, not to commit adultery, but he says, if you even look at a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. So I think just a pin is lust starts with the eyes. And, in the book of Job, I believe chapter 1, he says he made a covenant with his eyes not to look at a woman with lust. But, and like I said, I think that's still a constant fight for a lot of brothers, myself included, is, looking at women with lust. I think it's because sometimes you say, well, I'm not sleeping with her, I'm not talking with her, so I can look. Yeah. But the reality is lust starts with the eyes.
That's kind of what screwed David.
So he saw Bathsheba,
Yeah,
and it
and
went
he didn't
down.
reject it. See, the thing about David, it says he constantly rejected that thought. So he would go and do his job, but it says, but he refused to sleep with her and kept out of her way as much as possible. So
You mean
he's,
Joseph?
yeah, Joseph. Joseph is committed to doing the right thing on a daily basis. He has to deny himself on a daily basis to do the thing, to do it right. So he doesn't allow it to linger. He's not gonna hang out and see what happens. He's not gonna, you feel me? Like that's kind of what men like we would do. It's like, well, I'm not gonna do anything. That's where you get in trouble. Or I'm just looking. That's where you get in trouble. No,
Yeah.
don't play with it. Do not play with it. Move
Paul writes in
it.
1 Corinthians 6, he says, run.
Run. And that's what Joseph does here. It says, verse 12, she came and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding come to sleep with me. Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house. He didn't walk, he didn't stroll, he didn't hang around. No, when you dealing with these kind of things and this kind of temptation, don't play with it. Run. Like when you have that thought in your mind, reject it immediately. You let it sit for more than a couple minutes, it's like it's hard to get out of that. It's very, very difficult to get out of that. So you're better off not being in that position in the first place. It's like David. David looked and he had the chance to look away. When he kept looking, I mean, it was inevitable for him to do what he did, bro. Like I've been there. Like you don't reject it. It's only a matter of time until you screw it up.
So that's good. That's good. And I think that's good. Wow.
Yeah, I was just saying, yeah. So like you said, Paul says to run, and that's what Joseph did. He ran, doesn't allow it to marinate. He's not going to play around with it. He's not going to chat it up. He's not going to hang around, see, I'm not doing anything, so I'm good. I'm strong enough. Nah, it's like, yo, this is a situation I don't play with. I'm going to avoid her. And if it ever gets to there, I'm running away. That's what we should always take away.
And to finish this particular section, she ends up wrongfully accusing him of rape because she's upset that like this guy, man, is a freaking integrity. And I think what we could take from that is, again, always do the right thing, regardless if it means people are going to talk bad about you, they're not going to like you. Always do the right thing, because one thing I know is the right thing will always pay off. Doing the right thing will always pay off. It'll always pay off. You know, I remember not too long ago, like I was telling Stanley, I was in a scenario where I told you the same thing with John, where I could, if I really wanted to do something with her, I could have. But I was like, because the word of God speaks about, you know, adultery. It speaks about how God punishes those who, you know, basically are doing infidelity, et cetera, et cetera. But my point in saying all that is doing the right thing you'll never have regrets doing the right thing. The devil might tell you, man, you dumb, bro. Like you had that right in your hand. You stupid. Like Stanley said, he knows how to talk. The devil knows how to talk a good game to get you to will you win. Like, come on, bro. Like, you serious, bro? Like, she bad. But once you do it, he's snitching, bro. Nah. So my point is, doing the right thing. Doing the right thing will always pay off. 10 days out of 10, it'll always pay off, regardless of what the immediate outcome looks like. But no, it'll always pay off.
The beautiful part about like standing in integrity is that no matter what, you know you're right in the eyes of God, the owner of everything. So no matter if people think you're wrong, as long as you know you're right with God, that's all that matters. This is what shows me that's all that matters. Because as long as you're understanding, as long as you're on the path that God wants you to be, that means whatever they're doing is only going to lead you to your breakthrough.
Yep.
Once you get out of alignment with God, that's where you want to get. That's where you got to be like sweating. But that, you know, he gets put in jail for this. You know, obviously, you know, it's not at the moment. It doesn't look good, but you're in good standing with God. You did the right thing, no matter who saw it or not, and that's really what having the fear of God looks like. It's like you're not doing things right because people are looking. You're doing it because you know God is the only one that matters. You know God is the one that you're trying to please. You're not trying to please anyone else. And that's what you see with Joseph. And good, bad, or ugly, he's like, I'm going to continue to be a person of integrity. And that's what you can see. And I can eat from this because, you know, the temptations could be that. I'm pretty sure this was a huge temptation. And, you know, based on like the amount of time he had with God in the buildup of his discipline, he was able to, you know, cast that down and move on. And you know, I think that's the ultimate example of how to run away from, you know, a temptation.
Yeah, this is the ultimate example. You ain't even capping, bro. This is like an ultimate example for real.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a Bible verse that kind of tells you to run away from you know, those temptations. It literally tells you don't run away and don't entertain it. So, but that's good, man. That this has like the fear of God written all over it. That's how it looks. Are we on the next section now?
Yeah, just 19 to 23, and then we're all set.
All righty, here we go.
Joseph put in prison. Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed.
Yeah, that's what I said, man. You don't gotta worry, man. If you're doing it the Lord's way, it don't matter about anything else, bro. Everybody else can hate, everybody else can try to mistreat you, but you know that you're gonna have favor. Man, there's nothing like the Lord's favor, man. Like we read it with Jacob with the well, I think it was with the well, right? You know what I'm saying? Like we see it all over the place with Abraham, like pick a land, I don't care. Pick, you know, with Abraham and Lot, pick a land, I don't care. You know, like whatever land I'm on, God's gonna bless.
That's it. That's a fact. And you see that I say doing the right thing will always pay off. And what looks like punishment is actually an elevation. Because the point that we talked about last time was he went from serving his dad with the brothers. He's elevated to now serving Potiphar and having charge of a whole household. Now he's elevated to an entire prison. So he goes from a few sheep to an entire house to a whole prison. And next, you talk about the palace. So he went from elevation to elevation to elevation, but it didn't look like elevation in the moment. But this is why we have to always look in our lives and understand that as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, certain things that might look bad are really good. Just give us some time and look at it with spiritual eyes. This was actually an elevation for him. And you see that. It says in verses 22, before long, meaning it didn't take too long. The warden already peeped. Got to put this guy in charge. Something's different about this guy. He's successful in everything he's doing. He has integrity. Before long, meaning it didn't take long, you're in charge. So you see that it was an elevation, it was a promotion. And this is why I say, let's continue to do the right thing. We who are children of God, like Joseph, we are children of God. And we can eat, like you said, from him in the sense that if you do the right thing, everything will go well for you. Everything will go well for you.
For real.
Even when you're wrongfully accused, it'll still go well for you.
Right. The thing is, like, you might have pitfalls. You might have weapons formed against you, like we see in the Bible, but they won't prosper. That's the thing. You'll have weapons formed against you. It doesn't mean you won't have any downs, But the thing is, all of the things that happen to you will serve and be useful for the end goal, the purpose. And that's the beautiful part about it. But the thing is, when you get out of alignment with God, then that's when it's truly bad. You know, when you're getting out of alignment with God, you're going through some unnecessary things. You know, like, but even then, God can turn that into a masterpiece, because you've seen it with, like, Solomon came out of a bad thing, you know, Solomon. You know what I'm saying? Like, he can turn even the worst things into a masterpiece, but in the end, like, just saying, like, if you stay in that alignment, the afflictions you get out from the outside is actually working to your favor.
Mhm. That's good. And I think that's it. And you see verse 23, I think the only thing I'd add is it goes back to the acts of service or working, being a servant. It says in verse 23, the warden had no more worries. Why? Because Joseph took care of everything. And because Joseph is continuing to serve, the Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. So I just, the point of emphasis is, again, is you will have success through your working hard, working like you're working for God. Because ultimately, we are all born to serve. Adam was created to tend to the garden. He wasn't created to just chill in the garden and have his feet up. He was literally created to tend to the garden, name the animals, cultivate the ground. Like this, we were all created to serve. And I always say this to my wife. I'm at a point in life, I've come to the conclusion we are all here to serve. You're either going to serve God or you're going to serve the devil. But the point is, you're here to serve. You're here to work. You were created to work.
That's right.
Work what? Work God's purpose. Work what God's will is for your life. But the point is, you got to work. And if you are willing to submit to God's will for your life, you will have favor. It's that simple. When you finally can get to the point where you realize, oh, God created me. Oh, he created me for his purpose. Oh, okay. So I'm going to submit to that and do that with a good attitude. I'm going to do the best of my ability. When you get to the point where you do that, now God says he's in alignment with my will for his life. He's serving that guy like he's serving me. Pour out favor on that guy. Pour favor on him.
That's right.
Pour favor. And it's that simple. You're here, created by God to work. If you get in alignment with God's will for your life, you work like you're working for God, you're going to get favor. It's that simple. It's that simple.
That's right. But I
Yeah.
think that's
That's
all.
it.
6 sections, so we'll wrap it up. All righty.